Basically asserting that her words could play no part in subsequent violence, but people criticizing her words might indeed foment violence. She also was absolving herself of her own crosshairs map. Mrs. Palin essentially criticizing Congresswoman Giffords herself, who had spoken out about that map here on MSNBC last March.
This is a situation where, people don't, they really need to realize that the rhetoric and firing people up and, even things, for example, we're on Sarah Palin's targeted list, but the thing is that the way that she has it depicted has the crosshairs of a gun sight over our district. And when people do that, they've got to realize there's consequences to that action.
One person who understands the consequences is a relative of Congresswoman Giffords, her cousin Lynn Paltrow. Prior to the release of Palin's video, Ms. Paltrow wrote an open letter entitled Dear Sarah Palin, in which she asked, quote, "If you do not mean literally that elected officials should be targeted with rifles and threatened by political activists armed with loaded weapons, what do you mean?" Lynn Paltrow joins us now, the executive director of the National Advocates for Pregnant Women, and as mentioned, the second cousin of Congresswoman Giffords. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Obviously, we're delighted for you about the news of her eyes opening tonight. We'll keep that front of mind here.
And if I may, I think we're all thrilled. And I just do want to say that the family who's closest to her, and her husband, Mark Kelly, on her website has said that people who really want to show their support, because it's frustrating to be able to do so little, can contribute to the Community Food Bank in Tucson, Arizona, and the American Red Cross of Southern Arizona.
Let's talk about what happened early today. Did the Palin video address the sort of concerns you had as a related family member of the Congresswoman?
I think, as an American, we definitely want to see the kind of civility, and we want to see people who are leaders speak out and explain that change needs to come about peacefully in this country and that violence is never the answer. And I think she did speak to a lot of that. And I think many people are speaking that. There were places where she even sounded a little bit like you. At the same time, different leaders speak better than others. And the hope that she might speak about how real nonviolent change comes about, that it's by people who are willing to be attacked, rather than to suggest that criticism is an attack, rather to suggest that attacking is okay, would have been even more appreciated.
I want to take a look at something else she said and then get your reaction specifically to this clip from the video. Here it is.
In times like these, we need God's guidance and the peace He provides. We need strength to not let the random acts of a criminal turn us against ourselves or weaken our solid foundation, or provide a pretext to stifle debate. America must be stronger than the evil we saw displayed last week. We are better than the mindless finger-pointing we endured in the wake of the tragedy.
So she's saying that she does not want tragedy to stifle debate, which is a fair point. I think everybody would agree with that. But did she not just miss this opportunity for an open debate about violent rhetoric and how poisonous it can be, whether or not it's responsible for any given act on any given day in any given year?
I think that would have been very much appreciated. And I think it's very important that people understand that when people raise questions about what speech does, what effect it has or it doesn't have, that's not an attack on other people's First Amendment rights. That's the exercise of the First Amendment. And in particular, I think it would have been much appreciated. She had one line in which she talked about when we take up our arms, yes, we are talking about our vote. And I think for her constituents, it may need to be a lot for everybody. Let's talk about all of us. It needs to be clear. The Second Amendment is not the same as the 15th Amendment or the 19th Amendment. And when you use language like lock and reload and you tell voters to come back and reload, I had to use the new scanning voting machines in New York City. It didn't require locking and reloading. Okay. And
in your capacity, you have another experience with this and this question of rhetoric perpetuating cycles of violence, or at least contributing to an atmosphere. Again, there's no cause and effect necessarily here, but there's an environment. You were an ally of the late Dr. George Tiller. What did your experience with him tell you about this?
I can tell you, but first let me say thank you. You are one of the few people who I think noticed and commented on the similarity in the rhetoric, that it's not just elected officials and it's not just judges who are facing death threats, but it is people, as I said I sent an email to Congresswoman Giffords after her offices were shot at after the vote for health care reform, and I told her that I was sorry she had to be as courageous as in favor of health care reform as the providers of health care to women who sometimes need abortions and other reproductive health care services. I know that language isn't necessarily the cause of behavior, but I do know it doesn't necessarily cause terrorism, but I do know there are a lot of people in America, caring, loving, humane health care providers who every day live in terror because of that language.
Lynn Paltrow, cousin of Congresswoman Giffords, Executive Director of National Advocates for Pregnant Women. Again, great to meet you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.